My incredible guest today, tech journalist, entrepreneur, and pioneer, the one, the only, Kara Swisher. Welcome to The Art of Excellence. In the words of Aristotle, excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. I am your host, Glenn Zweig. Join me now as I dive into the lives and careers of world-class entrepreneurs, athletes, entertainers, scientists, thought leaders, and explorers to uncover the ingredients to their extraordinary accomplishments. My guest today is Kara Swisher. Kara is the host of the podcast On with Kara Swisher and the co-host of the Pivot podcast with Scott Galloway. She was also the co-founder and editor-at-large of Recode, host of the Recode Decode podcast, and co-executive producer of the Code Conference. She was a former contributing opinion writer for the New York Times and host of the Sway podcast and has also worked for the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. Her latest book is titled Burn Book, A Tech Love Story. Well, Kara, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Glenn.
Well, guess what? Good news for you.
What?
I start this interview with a compliment.
Okay.
I think you are one of the top tech journalists of this generation.
Oh, thank you.
And I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
For those that don't know, you have this sort of, for lack of a better word, this gumption, maybe bravado, this chutzpah.
Chutzpah.
No one seems to intimidate you. You're not afraid to speak your mind. You call it as you see it. And you're never trying to appeal to anyone's ego, no matter how big and powerful.
Yeah.
So where does that come from?
Well, I don't know. The way I am. It's not that I'm not impressed with some people, because I certainly am, right? There's a lot of really impressive people here and doing impressive things. It's just that I don't think people, what sometimes happens to people when they have a level of success or money, especially money, they think money equates with competence. And I don't. I think there's a lot of ways to make money that doesn't mean you're that smart or interesting or wise. And so I tend to sort of look at people. I don't think anyone's better than anyone else because of money, for example, or say success. What I'm impressed with is this podcast is called The Art of Excellence, is excellence, right? If they make something excellent, I have a lot of respect. And it doesn't have to be, the world's biggest company or whatever, but if someone makes something shoddy and then makes money from it, I'm kind of like, you suck. Like, that sucks. Like, you may make a lot of money. Well, people like it. Well, people like Twinkies, and they're not particularly good, although Twinkies taste good on some occasions. But I'm impressed by excellence. I appreciate design, not just design, but even, I know it sounds stupid, but one of my favorite movies is Gladiator. I love it. And no one would call that excellent, but I would, because it really does deliver on that particular capes and sandals kind of genre, and that I happen to like. And so I like whatever people are trying very well to do in whatever genre they happen to be in.
Yeah. So do you ever get nervous? Does anyone ever intimidate you?
Not yet. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I'm trying to think. People I really, really like, I suppose. I have this dream of interviewing Taylor Swift and Dolly Parton at the same time, and I only want to talk about business. I think I would be, well, maybe I wouldn't be, because I want to talk, they tend to talk about their personal lives or their boyfriends or their sweet Kentucky home. I'm not interested in that at all. I mean, fine, great. I love it, but I would love to talk to them about their business, because I think there's both incredibly, and I mean this as a compliment, vicious business people, like really good at what they do from a business perspective. And so I think I probably would be nervous if the people I really admire in that regard. But no, I guess not. I kind of admired Steve Jobs for that, and he didn't make me nervous. So I guess if you're not nervous at Steve Jobs, you're not nervous at anybody.
Yeah, very true. We'll get to Steve Jobs in a little bit. There's a quote in the book that I really like, And it's not your quote, it's a quote you reference, French philosopher, I'm probably going to butcher this, is it Paul Virilio?
Berlioz. It's a great quote. It's my favorite quote.
So what's now one of my favorites? Here we go. When you invent the ship, you also invent the shipwreck. When you invent the plane, you also invent the plane crash. When you invent electricity, you also invent electrocution. Every technology carries its own negativity, which is invented at the same time as technical progress. I love it. So apropos, given all this generative AI madness going on, all the debate around its virtues, its potential harms. So curious how you think about it. Is it any different from the internet, social media, mobile, any transformative technology in terms of its potential for abuse?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's to me, that's the heart of the book, that quote. There's a lot of quotes I really like in there that I'm using. I love the one from the poet. I never turned anyone into a pig. I made them look like pigs. Like they were pigs. They were pigs. I made them look like pigs. And I like that too, because I feel like I do that. I don't make them terrible. They're terrible. And I just tell you they're terrible. I describe what I see, not what I believe. But that quote is at the heart of the book, really, because I think one of the issues I had with a lot of technology, people, not the technology, is that they never understood consequences, right? They could not imagine. They thought for some reason accepting and understanding negative consequences ruined their vibe in some way, ruined their ability to innovate. And I understand that on some small, immature level, that if you don't go for it, if you think about every accident that could happen, you're not going to do anything, right? You could become, stop. But that's not really what an adult does, right? An adult goes, okay, I'm going to do this anyway. I know this. And anticipation of consequences is, I think, at the heart of this book, is this inability by this group of people to anticipate consequences. And the thing is, one of the things that Silicon Valley and tech and Americans in general lack is any appreciation of history or memory of history, which is even more, not even appreciation, but memory. You have candidates right now going, slavery? What was that? Like, come on, stop it. Like, you sort of are like, we may not be responsible for it today, but it's certainly happened and it informs everything we do, right? It's not a blame game kind of thing. That's what they're worried about, people feeling that they're on the hook for it. And they are, to an extent. They're on a hook for what we do now, for sure. And so one of the things that's important for me in that book was to talk about the idea of responsibility as you do things, as you innovate. So no matter whether it's the old internet, whether it was electricity, we understood there were implications for electricity. People got electrocuted when electricity first came out. People were nervous about it. People abused it. There was all kinds of things. A sword. Hello, swords have killed a lot of people, right? Any technology that is significant, it has significant impact. And the internet, the people who created the internet really didn't want to hear that, because it really literally bummed their vibe, essentially. And so with AI, I'm not worried about the technology as much as I am about the people using it, and the people not anticipating bad people using it, right? Like, it's just like bad people will use it. So what are we going to do when bad people use it? They hate to imagine that. And all I do is imagine that. And but I also can imagine the good parts, right?
They hate, meaning the founders, the entrepreneurs?
In general, not everybody, by the way. This is not a blanket statement, but anticipation of consequences and the ability to accept your responsibility when dangerous things happen is not in their toolbox at all. And in general, there's certain particular people who get it, but like in general, privacy, what? That's in the way. Copyright, huh? And then if you say something to them saying, just a second here, let's think about the implications, they think you're trying to slow them down. And that's how immature people behave. And I sometimes use the word adult toddler, but that's an insult to toddlers, because toddlers have more self-control. I have toddlers, so now I know. I mean, I have a lot of toddlers. I've had them.
Yes. I used to. We're a little bit past that point.
I did too, and now I have new ones. So I have more kids. So
I want to turn back the clock on you. So your father died when you were 5 years old. He was just 34. And my sense from the book is the memories, well, mostly faded to black if there were any memories. You were pretty young.
Hmm. Hmm.
So since you didn't grow up with a father, it's sort of hard to know perhaps how that void affected you. And while I know you can never know what you never had,
Sure.
I'm wondering, did maybe the concept of the ephemeral nature of life shape you in some way?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%. I think a lot of people that resonated with me that I covered also had that experience. It's either
Mm.
with themselves, like Steve Jobs, who was dying for quite a while, right? He was sick for quite a while and he was sick during his most productive years, if you really think about it, right? The stuff that really happened here. He had an illness that was life-threatening.
Hmm.
I don't think he ever thought he was going to die.
Well, he didn't have to die, but
Yeah.
that's another
Yes,
story.
I
Yeah.
get that. That's another story. That's another story. Everybody has their journeys, right? But I think there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about my dad. I'm pretty
Mm.
old. I'm 60 now. And I do understand the void that it leaves and that it put in me at a very young age. And since I have so many kids, I do understand how well my kids know me at 2, right? And I was 5. And so
Mm.
the like my 4-year-old and I are bonded. Like can you imagine if I went away? Like it makes me sick to think about, but that has informed everything I do because I understand that life is ephemeral. And I think that's very hard for most people. And so therefore, I don't have that kind of time. And I think that does inform me when someone says something stupid to me, for me to go, that's stupid. Like, I don't have time for this.
Mm.
Like, let's get to the point. And I don't have time for the niceties, that not even niceties, the nonsense that people tend to put up with. I don't have room for nonsense. And so that's probably what drives me in a lot of ways,
Mm.
because I do think in terms of I have this many days to live or whatever that happens to be. I don't know what it is, but you're wasting my time. Like, and that, so I think that's one of the reasons. The void is rather significant when a parent dies. And actually, interestingly, a lot of uh, tech people have had, a lot of people have, but a lot of significant tech people have had bouts with that, whether it's Steve Jobs being adopted, or Larry Ellison's mother going away, or Elon's very troubled relationship with his father, and I would say his mother too, but she wouldn't, but I would. I think there's a lot of parental influence so I think about that a lot. I think about it a lot.
Yeah. I lost my mother when I was in college. So it's been a while.
Oh, still, it's young. That's young.
And I don't know if this makes any sense, but for a lot of years, the grief was around the fond memories I would have of her.
Hmm.
But recently, it's more the memories I never even got a chance to have, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
That I wish I had,
Totally.
that adult relationship.
Yeah, I thought when I got married, I wish my dad was there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Just all kinds of stuff like that. The things that don't happen, right?
yeah,
You imagine them there.
yeah. You said you're 60 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're very young, 60, by the way. I know it's an audio podcast, but
Yeah, I know. I do. I look young. People are surprised. My family looks young right till the day they die, and then they keel over, looking great. So, we have great skin.
I know this day and age, being gay is not a big deal. It's almost.
Still a big deal, unfortunately.
When did you come out of the closet?
Oh, since I was 4, but I didn't really come out, right? You couldn't articulate it back then. I was aware
Mhm.
of it very early. Like I
When
was
did
like, oh,
others know about it? Friends, family?
I think I started in college. In college, I started, and then I came out, unfortunately, because I just had it with lying to people.
Hmm.
There's a real cost, and I saw a movie, the Vito Russo. I read the book and then saw the movie, The Celluloid Closet, and I remember it affecting me a great deal because I'm a student of media, of course, like a lot of journalists are. And the implications of all that entertainment on gay people, where the depictions of lesbians were sad and clingy and weird and creepy, and the depictions of gay men were either conniving or kind of fussy and
Hmm.
poofy and ridiculous friends. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
kept looking at all those depictions. I'm like, that's not me. That's not people I know. And what's the implications of this, right? What's the impact on regular people who may or may not know gay people? Because here we are hiding ourselves in plain sight. And so one of my issues was to I just got tired of it. And I told my mom, I came out, I think probably first to my mom. And then she's such a lunatic about this issue. It was not very nice, that I had to come out to everyone at the same time. I must have been 20.
Hmm.
And or it could have been before that. It was sometime. Different people knew about it earlier, but not much earlier. And so I just had it, and the minute she knew, she had to tell everybody, and then I had to tell my grandmother, who was wonderful about it, my brothers and my friends and everything else. So it was sort of a very, I would say, violent coming out, because it was not, it was fast and furious essentially. And then after that, and AIDS was happening
Hmm.
across the country. And I think I was like, this is fucking ridiculous that I have to hide myself. I
Hmm.
wanted very much to be in the military, and I couldn't, because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. My dad was in the military, and I had hoped to do some military.
Because of your dad?
Yeah, I'm weirdly patriotic. Lesbians are weirdly patriotic.
I
I
didn't
don't
know
know.
that.
I just was like, you know what? I'd be a fucking great admiral. I would have been a great admiral. I would have been good in the CIA. And a lot of things were at the time not were limited. Like you
Hmm.
couldn't, because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Which was, thank you, Bill Clinton. I always say, thanks, Bill. Everyone's like, Bill Clinton. I'm like, no, sorry. He had plenty of shitty things he did. Besides
Yeah.
the rest of it, besides I love Monica Lewinsky. I know her quite well now, and I think I like Hillary Clinton quite a bit too. But he's not. I'm not a fan of Bill Clinton. It just was like it was ridiculous. It was another waste of friggin' time of my time that I had to go through this to make other people comfortable with something that was innate in me. But it just was stupid. It was stupid. And then when it became very stupid to me because of all those reasons, I was like, this is dumb. I'm going to tell everybody.
Yeah. So 20, you're in college. So this is around that time, and I was reading that you studied, at least as your minor, the Holocaust in
Yeah.
college.
Yeah. I focused on it.
Yeah, and what I read was the study around propaganda, or at least in part, in how groups like the Nazis would use media to twist the facts,
Right.
radicalize the populace, demonize populations, etc.
Mhm.
Sort of scary how history repeats itself, which is another
Right.
story.
Right.
Why did you study that?
I've always been interested in liars. I know it sounds dumb, but I've always been interested in how people use propaganda. It wasn't just, well, Nazism was sort of the apogee of that, right? They
Mm-hmm.
really, if you really study it, besides being heinous, it's fascinating how they did it, right? It's a real set of tools. And it's not a new fresh thing. I had been interested in communist systems in general and their use of this. By the way, US has plenty of propaganda, whether it's, be for the war, whatever, everybody does it. Everyone has a version of it. And I really found like China was used these different people use different things, whether they were walls, they had these walls in China that had information on them, like how information got to people and how it influenced to them. And in the United States, I was particularly interested in Joe McCarthy. I got really obsessed with how he did that for the short time he did. I was interested in the Salem witch trials. I was interested in that that was propaganda, right?
Mm-hmm.
About women and about certain malcontents in society and ridding them. And so that always interested me, like, and the uses of, and how when technologies got out, like the Gutenberg Bible and printing, really, how things changed rather dramatically or radio, and how it could, like, radio was a perfect example of getting abused and used well, right? Hitler used radio in a very effective manner. And more than that, movie depictions, all kinds of depictions. And so I just, whenever there was a course, I took all these courses about communications, and how these windows we see about ourselves. There's one class I took at Georgia. My area was called Comparative and Regional Studies. I don't quite know what that means today, even to this day. But I really thought, like, how do we see things? You can compare societies, but they all have at their heart propaganda, right? Of whatever happens to be
Mm.
the propaganda we're going to do, and how history, not how history is told by the victors, but how history is told and what comes down to us, later. Henry Ford's a good example. Another one, the anti-Semitic stuff was in plain sight. But of course, later, it wasn't until later that people began to discuss it widely. Or Charles Lindbergh, another terrible anti-Semite and possibly a disturbing figure, despite all his accomplishments. And so I just was always interested in that, and how it was used to change populations. And obviously, Nazi Germany was the most. How did that happen? How did that happen? Right? Because it really, the population went along with what happened. And how did they do that? And I tried to look at it from not a necessarily a horrified perspective, though I certainly had that, but it's going to happen again. I kept, you know what I mean? Like it was inevitable that given how good they were at manipulating people and how easily people were manipulated, that once I saw the internet, I was like, oh, this will be bad.
Oh, it's happening as we speak. And now you got
every day.
Back to generative AI. Now you got that overlaid on the internet, which if we could fast forward, you know how you can fast forward a podcast like 30 seconds?
Sure.
If we could just fast forward to November and just be past the next 10 months, I would love it, because I'm not looking forward to.
Well, only thing I would say is people are aware of it, right? People are aware of the issue more than you think, right? I think that the people are, at least at the time the first one came out, the first time it was used, people got more easily manipulated. I think people are aware that it exists, which is a good thing, right? We can see that it's going to happen. I think what's happened is, look, I always say this, but Hitler didn't need Instagram. He didn't. He did it just fine with tools of the time, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is a more sophisticated, because it really can target individual people and radicalize them much quicker. And with generative AI, even quicker. And then what it takes is we end up in a post-fact society, right? That it's hard to know the facts. Everything's an opinion, or it's, well, here's a different take. And just by declaring them, it gains credence. You look at anything coming out of Tucker Carlson's mouth about Russia, you're sort of like, and no, but people believe it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I wrote a column, and I'm not going to tell you the date I wrote it, but let me read you. I was quite concerned with the way Trump used Twitter, right, at the time. This is pre-Elon Musk. And I wrote, it so happens that in recent weeks, including at a fancy pants Washington dinner party this past weekend, I've been testing my companions with a hypothetical scenario. My premise has been to ask what Twitter management should do if Mr. Trump loses the 2020 election and tweets inaccurately the next day that there had been widespread fraud, and moreover, that people should rise up in armed insurrection to keep him in office. Most people I've posed this question to have the same response: throw Mr. Trump off Twitter for inciting violence. A few have said he should only be temporarily suspended to quell any unrest. Very few said he should be allowed to continue to use the service without repercussions if he was no longer the president. One high-level government official asked me what I would do. My answer: I would have never let it get this bad to begin with. I wrote this in 2019.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? October of 2019. And when I wrote this, it was a hypothetical.
Were you thinking it was a complete hypothetical? Something made you write that.
Because I studied propaganda. I was like, look what he's going to do. This is what I think he's going to do. This would be the move, right? This is the move. And he had already dabbled in election fraud. He was busy insulting immigrants and people with disabilities, but or COVID or China, whatever. He has a whole panoply of people he insults. But I was like, election fraud is exactly where you go. Right? That's where you go. It just was me I should have been a CIA analyst. I was like, that's what I'd do if I were a terrible person. And so when I wrote that, Twitter management called me and said I was irresponsible for suggesting such a thing could happen. And I was like, I think I'm telling you what's going to happen. And it's not a good guess. It was a good analysis, right, of how you use these tools and what would be most effective. And so, at the time they said, this is wrong. How dare you say this? And I was like, for sure. It's going to happen. It could happen.
You've got an incredible sixth sense.
It's not. You just have to. It's not a sixth sense. It's all you do is say, what's he been saying? Like the same thing that I opened the book on. Like he's going to attack immigrants. He's going to do it. Like he said he's going to do it, right? And now all the tech people are like, no, he's not. He doesn't really mean it. I'm like, he really means it. It works. And of course, here we are today with the same nonsense that was happening before.
But you're very good at reading people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to actually jump to this quote, and this is a quote of yours, not some French philosopher. And this is about describing big tech moguls. Mm-hmm. Okay. Too often, Inventors are painted as heroic, with their faults glossed over in our accepted narrative. Most are damaged in a significant way, usually from early in their lives. Tech is littered with men whose parents, typically fathers, were either cruel or absent. By the time they grew to be adults, many were unhappy and often had some disgruntled tale of being misunderstood before they were proved triumphantly right. Most of all, the damaged ones shared one sad attribute. They all seemed achingly lonely.
Mm-hmm.
It's really powerful.
Thank you.
So this victim narrative, this is what fuels them?
Some of them, not all of them. Tim Cook, I'd never say that about. And I wouldn't say that about Steve Jobs either. He gave as good as he got, right? Like he understood criticism, and it's so interesting that he's always seen as the volatile one. I'm like, today, I'd like some more Steve Jobs today, right? I'd love some, like at least he would debate with you. If you look at our interviews over the many years, he debated. He wasn't mad, and afterwards he didn't get all pissy about it, right? I'd be like, I don't agree with you. He'd say, I don't know, and it was fine because he was an actual adult, so you could have a conversation and not, it wasn't personal. What happened with a lot of these people is because they're so wealthy, so ridiculously wealthy. And look, I'm a capitalist, I get it, but at some point they're gaming the system for themselves, like Elon's doing it right now as we speak. And it's not about their excellence; it's about their ability to game the system. And they just their emptiness has to be filled by praise by enablers, which I think there's plenty of people that are just the recent Wall Street Journal stories on Elon's drug use. They're all enabling him because and what I liked what the Journal did with this follow-up article was, you know why? Because they're paid by him. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars on that. So what's a little what's a little instability and problematic drug use among friends, right? That kind of thing. Again, I'm not fine. Take ketamine, but it looks like it's having some impact that's not good, right? It's a good friend would tell you that. And so I found a lot of them to have big, huge deficits in their upbringing. Possibly. I'm not a psychologist, but you could see I have lots of kids. I get it. And people don't have enough attention. And they replaced it with enablers and people who lick them up and down all day and an ability to fence themselves off from the population, right? Whether through they go from their cars, their expensive cars, to their planes, to their boats, to their houses, to their bunkers. You know what I mean? They create these environments. I call them cashmere prisons, and they have a lot of staff. They suddenly they didn't have a lot of staff, and then they do. Not all of them. Again, not all of them. Brian Chesky doesn't do this, right? He's with regular people. He's with his family all the time. What a wonderful family he has. But they do that, and it creates this sense of godlikeness, almost king-like, king or god or whatever you might imagine their lives to have been like, kings. And then when anyone goes, just a second, sir, they get angry. That's my experience with Elon, for example. The minute I said, just a second, sir, in a way he didn't like when he was trending towards COVID kooky and obvious drug use, it was things change. By the way, he used to argue quite a bit. He was one of the few that did. A good person who is, to me, a normal person is Mark Cuban, for example. He's very willing to engage with you and not think it's a constant attack on his personality. A grievance, I call it the grievance industrial complex. The richest people in the world, the angriest and most aggrieved and victimized is always a comical thing to watch.
Let me ask you, Kara, why is it so different today? I mean, back in the day when I was in the Valley, and Steve Jobs, you mentioned, Bill Gates, a number of these.
I kind of like Bill. He's okay.
And not that they were lacking.
He was arrogant. They were both arrogant, deeply, deeply arrogant.
There was absolutely arrogance, for sure. But I felt that they were also very respectable in a sense. And you don't have the lack of a filter. You don't have them back in the day opining on topics outside of their industries or their businesses. What's happened today that these, I might have to go through every single one of them, but some of these leaders just feel that this is their right.
Yeah. Well, Bill Ackman's the latest. Bill Ackman, expert on diversity. That guy, right? Come on, you're just a fucking that guy. He's a money maker. You're a moneymaker. That's what you do. And sometimes you do it well, sometimes you don't. That's pretty much. I know you have opinions, but you don't have to share them with everybody. It's like a guy at the bar just happens to have a lot of money, so we listen to him.
Is it we just, well, I've got 100 million followers, therefore I must opine on everything out there. It's just, and it never used to be that way.
I find it strange. I find it, I think it reached some of it's very toxic, like when Elon did that thing on Paul Pelosi, pretending it was some gay love triangle, which was sickening. His anti-trans stuff is grotesque, especially since he has a child who's trans. Um, the recent one was on a cesarean, heads of children, when you have a cesarean birth versus a vaginal birth. I literally was like, I had a cesarean, shut up. Speaking for all the women who've had cesareans, sit down.
What's like, and why are you even talking about it?
Right. Why? I was literally like, he was trying to say that they have bigger heads and therefore are smarter. I think I had no idea, but I was literally like, sit the fuck down. The ladies with cesareans would like you to sit the fuck down, and I'm their leader.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like society has somehow put these people on a pedestal.
Can I just say, Bill Gates has done the work, or Bill Gates has had his problem with the Epstein thing, let's be clear, like bad judgment there. But Bill Gates has done the work on learning. He goes places, he learns from people, he listens to doctors. I wouldn't mind listening to him talk about climate change. He's actually educated. He's a very intelligent person. He's talked to the world's experts. He respects expertise. And now he's articulating what he's learned. I'm down for that. I'm down for that. I'm down for that. Like it's good. He does it. He and Melinda Gates have done that around the thing. Now they're not always right, but they certainly are doing the work, right? Or Mark Cuban right now in DEI, he's talking about his experience with it and quite intelligently, right? He's like, here's what I've learned. It's not for everybody. Let me tell you my experience. Let me tell you some experts I talked to. That's welcome and it's fine. But it's because it's his experience, like, right? Otherwise, the rest of them, I don't want to hear what some of these venture capitalists think about Ukraine. I just don't. I don't. I really don't. And I don't know why they think they have all the answers. And they're often wrong and they're never in doubt, but they're often wrong.
All right, back to you.
Sure.
Okay, so you get out of school. It seems like day one, you're a journalist. Like you just sort of knew your calling.
I was at school, yeah.
And one of the first people you worked for was John McLaughlin, who was a really big deal back in the day.
He was. People don't remember him.
And I do remember. And beyond being misogynistic,
oh yeah,
he was a sexual predator.
He was.
And you decided to come out on the record in the Washington Post, I believe, about his behavior. And we are talking decades before the Me Too movement. This was not something you do back then. It was incredibly brave, Kara. This could have easily cost you your career before it began.
Indeed.
So there's not a question here as much as just my admiration for what you did.
Well, thank you. I just was like, this fucking guy, like I was in my 20s, I guess. Now, look, I wasn't conservative, so he was conservative at the time. By today's, he would be like a Bernie fucking Sanders. Like he wasn't conservative. He's the old conservative, right? And he was just a terrible person. And there were a lot of men like this who had a lot of power and abused it. This is not a new, fresh thing in society, right? Mm-hmm. And at the time, this was pre-Clarence Thomas, which I think was a big moment for our country in that regard. This was pre that. And so people just hushed, shush, like, let's pay you off or not pay you off or just have you leave, women. And this woman that he sexually bothered, sort of grabby. He was sort of your classic sexual predator, very like handsy kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And if you had to classify them, classic sexual predator. The effect on her was so severe. Like, like, couldn't she just slough it off? Well, why does she have to have someone touch her in a workplace? It was just ridiculous. And when he did that and then got away with it by paying the next person off, because we testified for another woman, because these people are serial in their behavior if they don't get stopped in some way. And even after they get stopped, they keep going, many of them. And so I just was like, this fucking sucks. I'm not going to put up with this shit. And when the reporter came to me, he said I could use my name off the record. And I was like, why? because everyone was scared of this guy, right? Because he was very powerful in the Reagan administration. He was a big influencer.
But no one was going on the record for any of these predators. It wasn't just this one, right?
Yeah, it was me and another guy who worked there who was a
Hmm.
wonderful man. And it's easier for a guy to do that, right? And he didn't sexually harass me. So I had a little more like I saw it. Like I was like, and so if you're a witness to something like that and it didn't go to court,
Hmm.
you have a duty to say something, right? And especially when you're a journalist and you ask people to talk on the record all the time, how could you not talk on the record, right? That's to me was the thing. It was just, it had, I spent my life trying to, like, can you just say this as you versus anything else? And at the time, you didn't have credibility for women. For these people are like, oh, did it really happen? Did they flirt with, there was all, it still happens today. And I just was like, fuck this guy. I'm going to say what I saw and I don't care. Yeah, what's he going to do to me? It's what happened. It's exactly what happened. And I do think it gave credibility to that story. I do. I think me and there were two or three other people that talked on the record. Maybe just two of us. I think maybe just two of us in that particular article. But it was like, oh, that you could ask this person and people could believe me or not, but I put my name next to it. So it must matter enough to me to do it. So
Hmm. Well, I love it that you did it. And it didn't stop. You didn't even slow you down. And you became a very prominent journalist.
yeah,
And you're
it
working
helped
for
actually.
it actually helped. It was a
In a
tailwind.
way.
So, but it was interesting. I always I'm intrigued by people's career pivots,
Hmm.
and I think this was one of yours because you found your calling. You're doing really
Yeah.
well. You're working for one of the prestigious newspapers,
Hmm.
and you sort of were growing a little bit restless.
Very much so.
So here's another quote of yours. I felt trapped in a prison of expectations in a medium I barely believed in. Weekly ruminations by me seemed quaint. I wanted a daily soapbox to expectorate in small bursts and without the onerous exhaustion of numerous editors weighing in with often pointless changes.
Yeah.
Uh, so, how did you really feel?
It was called, and it's a terrible way to say it, but it was called drive-by editing at the Washington Post, which I
Hmm.
hate because, of course, drive-by shootings are terrible. But that's what they called it. That's the word they used. But there was always someone, it was interesting because there were a lot of great editors, but everyone had a different take. And, you know, they were all sure you could do that, you could do that. And I just was tired of, I just wasn't good at, I was like, can you leave me alone? Like, I think I'm good by myself. And they always wanted me not to say what I thought. Like, and
Hmm.
I had that to be sure thing drove me crazy. I don't know why those three words drove me so nuts. I think that if I had to attribute the creation of all things D, it was the to be sure sentence, which is to be sure, some people think Webvan is going to be huge. I was like, to be sure, they're idiots. And I wanted to say that, right? Like, and of course, grocery delivery was going to happen, but not with this particular shitty company. And it still was a great idea, right? I wasn't against the idea. I was against this ridiculous funding and everything else, and these particular people, and the way they did it. And so I just was like, I can't. I just can't. It was the same thing that with McLaughlin. I just can't sit there and be like, yes, 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 sir. That's the way we should do it.
The traditional medium didn't
Mhm.
allow you to be you.
Yes, and I was like those entrepreneurs, by the way, and that's the good part of those entrepreneurs. They're instead of saying they're like, why do we do it this way? Like that's what I think a really great entrepreneur does. Like goes, what, what, what's the? It might be a good way to do it, by the way. I think bad entrepreneurs go, we just have to blow it up for the sake of blowing it up. I think good entrepreneurs, and I think I am pretty good one in media,
Hmm.
say, why do we write headlines when AI can do it? I had just had an argument with someone about this. I was like, let AI write headlines for fuck's sake. Like it works better. Aren't you against AI? I'm like, not when it works better. I'm not against, faucets and clean water either. Like it's better, like kind of thing. And so,
Hmm.
so I tend to, that's what it was. And then one of the things I also hate is people that bellyache in journalism about their jobs and the people and the bosses. They sit around and bellyache. You know that you've been in, maybe you haven't been in a newsroom, but there's a lot of bellyaching happening.
Yeah.
And instead of like complaining, I was like, you know what? I'll just do my thing. And I don't want to live a life where I just complain about them. I want to just like, let's just remove myself from this paradigm because I'm not happy in it. rather than blame people, it's nobody's fault if I'm somewhere unhappy. It's like that in marriage or your relationships or anything else. If you're in an unhappy relationship, you should get out. That's really what should happen, or
Mm.
fix it, either one. But if it's not right, you should move. And so that's what I did. And I just kept doing that. I even do that when I left the New York Times. I just stopped liking doing it. And I didn't like what I was making. And
Hmm.
I was like, and they were, you know what? I could have been just fine, just phone in and in, but I don't feel like phoning.
Well, it's back to your life is short and don't waste time. It's
Yeah.
definitely a recurring theme. So you
Yeah.
partner with Walt Mossberg.
He's great. What the best man in America.
For those that don't know, again, another, I put the two of you
Hmm.
on your own pedestal in terms of tech journalism. So you started a couple conferences, right? There was
Hmm.
All Things Digital, Code, success right out of the gates.
Hmm.
What I thought was interesting is you innovated even around a traditional medium
Hmm.
like these conferences with a set of guidelines that sort of mixed it up a bit. So I was
Hmm.
hoping you could talk about what you
Sure.
did to shake things up. Yeah.
Well, I was, so funny. We got attacked by the New York Times back then. And they, of course, went on to do tons of these things. They all do that.
Mm.
They're like, like, the creaky people do that. Walt and I had been to a lot of conferences was the economic engine for this, by the way, because it made a profit right from the first year. Like it was money like in our pockets, not our pockets, Dow Jones's pockets at the time. And so we had been to a lot of events, and they were either hopelessly compromised, meaning sponsors got to be on stage and and get to, peddle whatever piece of shit they were peddling, and which made it dull. Nothing is worse than dull to Walt and I. It was like, this is boring. And then it didn't do real journalism. And I think interviews you can commit real journalism doing great interviews, which we did over and over and over again at Code, and get real insights into people and entrepreneurs and have really interesting discussions. And so what we were doing, what journalists do in print. So what's the friggin' difference? And it's actually more interesting. And so we designed a conference that we wanted to go to, that like we wanted to attend. And one of the things we kept doing throughout it is innovating during it. Something didn't work. We had a game show one year. It was kind of fun. Then we didn't do it again.
Mm.
We did all kinds of demos. First they worked and then not so much. And then we shifted them. We had, we just constantly at the heart of it were the interviews. That never changed. Very active, aggressive, but not obnoxious interviews, because what's the point of that? It's just to score points. I don't get that. You don't score points by just being snarky. You score points by getting people to say illuminating things. And so, or problematic things like my many Mark Zuckerberg interviews, right? That was
Mm.
very revelatory of him. Whether he meant to that happen or not, it did. And people got to see him. Travis Kalanick said terrible things on stage, and look what happened, right? Because you saw him. Being able to see people for what they are is a really powerful thing for audiences. So anyway, so we just did that. And then we started the website, which was less lucrative, but not bad for a while there. We should have gone with subscriptions at the time. It wasn't possible at the time. It just wasn't possible at the time. And if I went back, I would have done that. But at the time, it would have been a failure. We started that and it did really well. And one of the things I did was exactly what I said, which was when, say, someone like an excellent media reporter like Peter Kafka, he'd come back and he'd say, oh, Comcast is doing this. And Kara, here's why. The here's why never makes it into stories, right? I want to hear the here's why. Thank you, smart person who just did the reporting. Explain to me why. And then the audience gets insight.
Mm.
And either he's right or he's wrong, but at least he's explaining it through reported analysis. And that's what we were trying to do, reported
Mm.
analysis in real time.
You do seem to have this entrepreneurial wiring.
Hmm.
That's, I mean, take away the victim narrative and all the bad crap that these people are opining about, but you have a lot of that same drive that they do. I know these aren't mutually exclusive, but in your heart of hearts, at your core, do you feel like you're an entrepreneur or you feel
Yes.
like you're a journalist? What defines you more?
There's a word that I hate. I forget who coined it. I have a feeling it was Jessica Lesson, but other people have said it, which is reporterpreneur, which is the
Hmm.
worst word ever. It's a really terrible word, reporterpreneur. No, I think you have to. One of the things I recognized early, given the business implications of what was happening, and I think I did see that early. I was like, oh, I was just texting actually with Craig from Craigslist. I was like, you're in the book, just FYI. When I saw Craigslist, I was like, oh, wow, that's a problem for the Washington Post. That's a big business. Classifieds were a huge amount of their business. And when you saw that, you were like, well, that's not going to end well for the Washington Post. And I had just come off covering retail for them. And with Walmart didn't advertise, and all the local retailers that did died. I remember thinking that's not good for them, right? Like I was always thinking of the business implications, and so it was natural that it would extend to me, and I think that's been a good thing. And you could see the media industry having to have change, and why not do it yourself? And so a lot of what people are doing now, whether it's Casey Newton from the platform or Jessica Lesson, we did that early. We did that early. We started that idea that a journalist could break free. We just didn't have the same tools that are available today. But we were very early to that idea that Walt was the first star person in tech, right? He could move markets.
Oh, if he liked your product,
That's correct, right?
that
Yeah,
that was it was like Johnny Carson. A
yeah.
comedian comes on. If he has you sit on that couch, your career is then made. I felt like it was a similar thing.
Very much so. And by the way, what I loved about Walt is opposed to other tech reviewers, either they were like grotesque fanboys, which is everything that they did was perfect, which it wasn't, or they were like snarky. Then there was a whole strain of like, this sucks, this sucks. And Walt, if he liked it, that's why he was so trusted, because he told people what he liked.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just his opinion. It's just, this is what I think after doing enormous amounts of reporting, enormous amounts of testing. This is what I think. And then
Mm-hmm.
people liked his taste, right? It's like a great movie critic or something else. You don't have to agree with him, but this is his take. And I think that's something in this book, was doing. I think I'm also, of course, because I anticipate everything, what's going to be the criticism. And I was like, oh, they'll not like my take. And I was like, I don't give a fuck. It's my take. Like, you don't like what I think of Jeff Bezos? You have your own thoughts. Go for it. But I spent a lot of time with this guy early in his career, and I'm
Yeah.
telling you what happened to him. Same thing with Elon. You don't have to agree with me, all you little stands that want to like suck up to him. I spent a lot of time with him. I was quite close to him. I talked to him all the time, and then something weird happened. I'm going to have my opinion. And so I think Walt was so powerful because of that entrepreneurial and authoritative based on quality nature. Again, excellence. He's excellent, is what he is.
Yeah. Well, you go through and you talk about all of these. I hate the word titan, but these big
They are
tech
titans.
moguls, right? And let's start with Steve Jobs. And we touched on him earlier. You said in your mind he is the most consequential figure in the modern tech era. So you do seem to have an admiration for him that
I do.
rises maybe a notch or two. But why? Why Jobs?
Um, just because of his ability to be so creative. I think if you go back to those interviews, creativity is number one on me. I'm like, he was very creative, and I like that. He also had a respect for art as well as science, right? He talked about that a lot. And it wasn't just people are like, it's marketing. I'm like, no, it wasn't. Look at those products. You can see that he cares about design and art and the way things look. And it's not, if it was all flim flam, it wouldn't be the world's most valuable. You couldn't trick these amount of people this long, right? It's really good stuff, right? It's not the only stuff, but it's good, right? It's not the only ideas, but it's it's a pretty good record this guy has for hits. It's sort of like a movie maker that keeps making hits. You're like, at some point you're like, that's an excellent person, right? That's a high quality. He doesn't, not everything they do is perfect, but boy, they've got a consistent, or a sports, I'm not a sports person, but
No,
like,
no, he had a design aesthetic. He somehow
he
had a
did.
pulse on what the average consumer would, which is a very, very hard thing to do.
And he had his opinion. He had his opinion, like when he took the hard drive, the flash drive, like he's like, I just want to take it out because I want to. Like it was his take. Like good for him. Like I appreciated that. And he did that all the time. He takes things off the sides of the computers. Like good for him. Like and everyone got all mad and upset. And he just like, I don't care. He also anticipated so many things. His early interviews about privacy are, you go and watch those and you're like, okay, he saw it, right?
Hmm.
Or he created the word podcasting, like he did pod broadcasting, iPod broadcasting. If you look at that interview, that was that was a long time ago he talked about that happening, right? He had a very canny, and I don't think he predicted it. I just think he was a thoughtful person who could see around corners. And that's why I liked him. Look, he had all kinds of personal issues. And honestly, though, today he looks like they don't look so bad
It
in
pales in
comparison.
comparison.
It does. Like, so he misparked his car and was mean to one of his kids. Okay. And he wasn't that mean. He gave her a ton of money. So it wasn't that.
I didn't give Tim Cook one iota of a chance to do anything. And by the way, he's been a brilliant CEO.
He has.
Because the very nature of what you just said about Jobs, I'm like, no one will ever replicate that. And that's everything behind the magic of Apple. And next thing you know, you bring an operator. This was the guy that makes the trains run on time.
He's beyond that, though. He's actually, I think, maybe
Oh,
not
it's been an amazing run. It's been so impressive to watch.
It's like Satya Nadella. Like, look, Gates was a great entrepreneur too, in a lot of ways. Not everything
In
he
a
made
different
was
way.
excellent. Different way in terms of bringing software to in every pot, right? That was something he really did, like a chicken in every pot kind of thing. Satya Nadella, what a tremendous manager, what a tremendous CEO. Same thing, very similar. I put them
Mhm.
together, and also, FYI, lovely people. Each of them, I have so much respect for Satya. Such an interesting person. He's got a real, he's got a lot of challenges. He's got kids that have special needs. Um, just really, I knew him when he was in a very much smaller position at Microsoft, and I always admired him and his thoughtfulness. Same thing with Tim. Very thoughtful, a good man. I would, this is in my estimation. Has done things. I don't agree with a lot of the China stuff necessarily, but he talks about it at least, right? He does have his reasons, and I think he probably innately knows there were compromises he's made there. Both really great CEOs. And Jobs too. Like I tried to focus on some people I really liked and understood their faults for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Zuckerberg.
Hmm.
You said the most carelessly dangerous man in history, or certainly one of them in technology. So you're very intentional with your words. So
I am.
help unpack that. Carelessly dangerous because of all that privacy, the data.
I think he is a lovely person. Let me
Mhm.
just say, I think he's a very good parent. He looks like from afar. I've enjoyed talking to him. I think he's very earnest. I think he's also very much like his hero, August Caesar, done enormous damage, right? And in terms and without a lot of education. And I would point to the interview, not the one where he sweated, which was a very famous interview I did
Mhm.
with him. And I get why that was famous. I get it. It was a real good interview, right? And it really did reveal a lot about him as a person. The one I did about Holocaust deniers to me was the great moment.
Mm.
And it was in 2018, 19, something like that. And I had some very big issues with Alex Jones and the damage. And as a parent, and he had not been a parent yet, I believe, I was like, this is heinous what you're letting him do. And he keeps breaking the rules you set. Like, okay, if you're going to set rules and you're not going to enforce them, then something's wrong, not with him, but with you, right? That to
Mhm.
me. And, you can easily point, Alex Jones breaks rules. It's like, yeah, but you let him break rules. I focus on the people who let people break rules. And so, he can't have rules if you're not going to enforce them. And so we started the conversation talking about him. And because he was so ill informed about what free speech was, and that to me, he'd been taught it like it was like free speech for dummies or something. He didn't have any kind of wisdom. He was like, everyone gets to talk. I'm like, do they? By the way, you're not the government. So, you don't have to. You can make choices, right? You can make choice. And I used to use the expression of tainted meat. You can choose not to sell tainted meat. You really can, right? You really can just say, not me, I'll let the other guy do it. And so, and if you put any other thing in there, cigarette manufacturers, then it's so dead clear of what's happening here. And of course, he didn't have the intellectual training to do
Mm-mm.
that, right? But except he had enormous power.
You think they would have advisors, wouldn't you?
They do, but they
They
suck
don't
up to
listen.
them. No, they don't. These people that if you're paying someone, it's in their interest to agree with you.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
ultimately. I had one Facebook executive saying, "How many times can I disagree with him, Kara?" And I said 159 billion. That's how many when he's wrong. But he can't, he's right. He couldn't, right? He couldn't, he wouldn't have lasted if he did that. And so there's like Lincoln's the only one who listened to people who didn't disagree with him. It seems like, it's just, yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't, but the
Yeah,
stronger
yeah,
people do. And they are moved by it, by the way. And so he he put himself in an enormous position of power by having the dual stock structure, which tells you a lot about him. He wanted total control. Okay, great. Lots of people got to have that. So did the Google guys. So does the New York Times family, right? A lot of people have that. But then he didn't educate himself and know what he was doing. And then he wouldn't take responsibility for what had happened, right? No, it wasn't us. Zero chance there was Russian interference on. Are you kidding me? Where'd you come up with that? I remember when he did that. I was like, I wrote him. I'm like, where'd you come up with that number? Like, you just made that up. I think you just made that up. Like, I believe that's what just happened. Zero chance. Zero? Zero? Like, I remember thinking, like, that's a lie. And I think he just said it off the top of his head. I don't think he was trying to necessarily lie, but that's exactly what he did. So when we were having that discussion, he shifted the conversation from, because he didn't want to stick, because Alex Jones is such a heinous figure. He very quickly gets stuck in a swamp of terrible. And so he said, let's switch to Holocaust deniers because he's a Jewish person. And I was like, no, don't go there because I happen to know a lot about Holocaust deniers, right? He
yeah.
does not. I studied it for quite a while. So I was like, oh no, this uneducated person is wandering over to an area I know a lot about. But I'll let him. Let's watch as he does this because I wanted people to see how incredibly ill-informed he was, and he was making enormous decisions for the populations of the world, right? This is the guy who's making decisions for you. So, and let me say again, nice guy, okay? So I sound like Donald Trump there. So he starts to say Holocaust deniers don't mean to lie, which was astonishingly stupid.
I don't get it to this day. I really don't.
I don't either. And at that moment, it was if you listen to that interview, you can hear me thinking, are you fucking kidding me? Like, can you be this stupid? But I said nothing at the time because what I wanted to do there, and I thought it was one of my greatest moments of interviewing, I wanted people to hear his thoughts. So you understand what this person in enormous power, how he's thinking about this, because it's so wrong and so ill-informed. You need to know that. You need to see it. So he says as he goes on, and then, he gets in trouble. And I ran out of there. I published that mother as quickly as I could. Right? I was like, listen to this guy. Let's take a listen. And of course, anyone with any sensibility was like, what? What did he just say? And it wasn't a gotcha. Because I let him have paragraph after paragraph.
No, he got himself. He got himself. I don't know if what he was, and I'm not defending it.
He didn't know what he was saying.
Well, I think what he was, I could be wrong. I think what he was trying to say was these people aren't maliciously spreading lies. They actually believe it. But my point is, it doesn't matter whether they are stupid enough to believe it.
They are maliciously spreading lies. It's like how many angels on the tip of a thing. This is my whole point. Because I was like, this guy makes these decisions. He could make a decision that helps society, but he won't do it because he's married to this ridiculous notion of what free speech is, right? That's what it is. And I was like, you're not the government. The government shouldn't interfere with free speech. You can, sir, right? You are now peddling bullshit to the population, and it's very damaging bullshit. So 2 years later, after a flood, an ocean of anti-Semitism. Why do you think we're today where we are? I can tell you why. Because he refused to take it off at the time when it had the most impact, right? Because he's the only one who could have, right? He changed his tune and he took them off. So what happened in that? Did he get educated? He got educated. Oh, now I see. So we have to wait for him to learn something that we all knew. That's a dangerous position for any person to be in, is to have that kind of power and exercising it with no kind of wisdom. And to me, that was because, listen, again, this guy is I know people who don't like him are going to say he's a terrible person. He's not a terrible person. That's the problem. He's not a terrible person. Terrible people we can handle, right? We get it. We see them. But he has too much power. He had at the time too much power, too much influence, and not enough wisdom. And that was dangerous. And he was unaccountable. And that to me is always the death knell of a society.
Yeah, you just said it, Kara. It's not intellect, which he's got plenty of. It's wisdom.
He does. He's very
It's
smart.
wisdom. which is lacking. So finally, Elon Musk,
Hmm.
you've said the most disappointing of all the tech titans,
Hmm.
and you certainly seem. I listen to you and Scott a lot on the
Hmm.
Pivot, which I love, and you do seem to appreciate and maybe admire. I would go as far as to say that he is tackling some pretty audacious projects,
Agreed.
way more so than a typical entrepreneur. It's not like, oh, here's 140 characters.
Yeah, it's not making a dry. I remember when someone brought me a dry cleaning online. I was like, "Go away!"
Right.
Fixing, innovating dry cleaning. Wow, good for
Do
you.
something that matters. And I think some people might have read
Hmm.
he just implanted the first brain chip through this company
Yeah,
Neuralink, where
right.
to his credit, they're looking at how do you help.
If there's a. Let me just tell you, he says. I'm sorry. At this point, his credibility is.
But the fact that there's intent behind it around helping people that don't have use of their limbs, that is
I guess I don't know.
so is the fact that he just says idiotic things, he just goes on crazy rants. Is that it's not about the lack of his entrepreneurial genius, I assume. It's more
No,
just
no,
about
no, 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 no,
the
no,
role
no,
he's
no.
playing.
Let me just
beyond
say,
that.
with Neuralink, look, there's lots of companies in this space. As if he's the first one who thought about this. There's companies actively doing this that are not him. He just gets all the attention.
That have implanted or
that
they're
have
doing.
are implanting near the top of the brain. There's
Okay.
like 7 to 10 really significant companies in this
Okay,
space.
I didn't know
They're
that.
doing, of course not, because he sucks up all the oxygen in the room. But nonetheless,
Very true.
he says he's done it. Let me just contrast. Everyone thought Bill Gates was putting chips in your brain, and the MAGA people and the right wing people lost their minds. Elon Musk is actively putting in people's brains, and people are like, "What a genius!" Like, those same people, and you're like,
Yeah.
I thought you didn't like this. Would you like it? Like, it's crazy. That to me is nutty. Like, Bill Gates never put a chip in your brain. Elon is putting a chip in your brain, but this guy is an evil fuck, and Elon's a genius. Like, just let's put that out there for people to understand. Secondly, I do like his efforts. He was the one person. The reason I was attracted to him and called him a lot was because he was doing interesting things, whether it was space or the cars. Everyone else was doing stupid, stupid things, and I was bored talking to them. And he was doing cars. That's an important issue. Space, an important issue. The solar stuff, even if some of it was, even the digging thing, some of it felt a little flim-flammy, but okay, interesting idea, right? It was like, go under cities. I've been a proponent of building under cities. Like, I get it. Like, hard to do, hard to do. And so he was always doing that stuff. And that was I call him Space Karen now, but I like Space Elon. I like space. I like, I don't like car Elon as much as I did, because he has competitors now, and he's just being, petty and obnoxious about his competitors when there's some great competitors. If he really cared about the industry, he'd be thrilled he has competitors. If he really cared about humanity, he'd be thrilled there's a million new people, and he should take a bow and for pushing them, but he doesn't, because he's relentlessly competitive and relentlessly insulting of other people's achievements. In that way, he reminds me a little bit of Bill Gates in the old days. And one time Bill Gates said he said about Google, "What's it, a bunch of colored letters on a page?"
Who said that?
He did to me and to Walt. Yeah. "What's it, a bunch of colored letters on a page?" I was like, oh my God. And then the iPod, he said, it's a white box with a hard drive in it. It's trivial. And so my answer to him was like, well, if it was so easy, why didn't you do it? Just asking.
Exactly.
Asking questions. Of course,
That's your job.
they created the Zune, which was a terrible product, which was a hard drive in an ugly brown box that was misshapen. So getting back to Elon, so
Yes.
he does have this incredible, he is inspiring in a lot of ways. And that was the good part. And then something went, and it's not because I don't agree with his politics. Look, he doesn't have any, I don't even know what they are. What are they? He's just mad at everybody, right? Whether it's immigrants this week or trans people or gay people or women, or he's just like, he's perpetually aggrieved. And it's a sad frittering away of real brilliance. Right? And everyone's like, no, he's free. He's freed his mind. I was like, this isn't a movie. This is a man with enormous influence who is saying very dangerous and disturbing. And, Mark Cuban disagrees with him and makes a cogent argument, and he calls him a moron. Is that really debate? You're a moron. Makes some boob joke and moves on. Like,
Let me ask you something. And by the way, I'm with you 100%. I'm not defending the guy. I don't know if you saw him in SNL.
I did. I thought he was lovely.
Yeah, and he came out, I think, for the first time in public saying that I forget if he used the term, he's on the spectrum or he's got Asperger's or
Yeah,
whatever it
there's
is.
always some excuse.
I'm not defending the guy,
Right.
but is it possible that he doesn't even appreciate the gravity of some of these things that he says?
No,
It's not.
no,
Okay.
because at this point, here's the deal. Everyone treats him like a man child. He's an adult. He's 52 years old or whatever. He's an adult with 2,000 children. Stop it. Stop
Mm,
babying. Stop juvenilizing these adult men, right? That's to me is like, and the only reason they're doing this because he's super rich and he pretends he's Iron Man, right? He's not.
yeah.
He's like, he's cosplaying for a lot of men. Same thing with Trump. It's not a new, he's cosplaying, but at least Elon has some excellence. Trump is just one shitty business after the next of cheating and this and that,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
at least the guy does have accomplishments. But why when you're in this position, the world's richest man, or maybe not this week after the Delaware court, you've got all these assets to spend your life insulting people and being disagreeable in a way, dunking on people. That's what he likes to do, just dunk on people endlessly. Like he does it all. And especially people who don't trans people. Really? Like, come on. These are people who have had a hard time. Maybe they're mad about the way they've had a hard time. Is this the greatest use of your great mind to dunk on trans people? It is not. It is not. You can do it, but you're not striking a blow for woke culture, hive mind virus. He has everything he's such a drama queen about everything. And that's
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
exhausting. It's like, world is at risk. The reason he's doing this so he can be someone said something to me, and I'll finish on this.
Mm.
Was the guy who wrote the Facebook book. It was made into the social network, that
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So he said Elon thinks he's Ready Player One and our world is a video game and he is Ready Player One. He's the number one.
Hmm.
So everyone else is dispensable. And that's sad. Like here's a guy with enormous talent, enormous assets, enormous brain power. And because he didn't get hugged enough as a child, we all have to live with his problems, his personal problems, and they're writ large. And he's hiding them as a bold speaker of truth when he's just a really sad little boy
Yeah.
who wasn't loved enough, I guess, or something. Like, but guess what? He's 52 now. So I'm sorry for that sad little boy, but I'm not sorry for the 52-year-old. I wish
Yeah.
he would stop it. And
Yeah.
not even grow up. It's like, what are you doing with your incredible assets? And that's why it's disappointing,
Yeah.
you know. I liked New Elon quite a bit. I did. And I know he had all kinds of married. And people would give me a hard time for liking him back then, but I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people change, unfortunately, sometimes not for the
That's
better.
correct. Yeah.
So, Kara, you had a stroke
Yeah.
when one of your kids was about the same age you were
That's correct. Yeah.
when your father died. And you were mentioning how one of the early signs for you was when you were talking to yourself while writing, the words came out weird.
What a terrible way to die writing about Yahoo.
Well,
Nobody would have known, but I just think about that a lot.
I know this wasn't the intent of that passage, but it got me wondering about this habit you have of talking to yourself out loud as you write. So is that like a technique?
No.
What's in your head to what's on paper? You just do, do you always do that?
Nah, sometimes at the time I was tired and Yahoo had
Okay.
yet another disaster. And I was like, oh, this fucking company, what the hell? And I just talked out loud, like, what a fucking mess this company is. And as I was typing it, I was like, do I have to write yet another Yahoo fucks up story? Like it was about the 100th article and you sort of watch
Yeah.
this company fritter itself away. And so I was talking out loud. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. Like sometimes when I write some stories, I'm like, are you kidding me? It's often, are you kidding me? Why am I wasting my time doing this? And so that's what I was doing. Like, what another clusterfuck over there. And so I was just talking out loud and it was just funny. It was about that company.
It was a one-off. I like to try to dissect what makes people so successful in what they do. And we talked about the not caring what others think and following your gut and not having a filter and all these things. You've also got this uncanny ability to get people to open up.
Yeah.
Because without knowledge, without insights, there's no scoop
Sure.
and there's no Kara. How do you do that? What's your approach?
I think people, one thing you said, not care. I do care. actually. That's why I am the way I am. I don't, it's not that I don't care. It's that I don't care for idiots. That's different.
I mean, you don't care what other people think.
That's correct. That is born because I was gay, and then people don't like you because you're gay, and you're like, you're an idiot. For that's just seems stupid.
Mm.
You cannot like me because I'm mean or because you don't like what I say, but because I'm gay, sorry, I'm not gonna. You don't get to do that. I don't let you do that. I don't care how religious you are. It's ridiculous. It's like not liking someone because they have brown hair. Okay, you're an idiot. So in terms of getting people what to say, is that one, I think I'm actually very fair. I let people talk. I'm like, explain yourself. If you have this opinion, explain. I really do give people space. Two, I've stopped. I was started off much more snarky. I'm not. I'm more funny than snarky. Like
Mm.
I play with them a little bit. Like I treat them like human beings, and I accept and I don't let them stay on their talking points because I think most smart people hate talking points. They hate saying them. They want to they it sounds like that Tom Cruise movie, Few Good Men. He wants
Hmm.
to say the truth. They want to tell you the truth, right? They do. They want to tell you. They want to say they did the code red, right? He wants to say it. Um, and I do think people want to say what they think. I think they do. I just feel they're nervous about it. And the other thing is I don't let them not do that. And so when they say something that seems on talking point or it doesn't seem true, or they say something that is not factually correct, instead of using, which I think is a shitty technique by interviewers, is like some people say this is that people, they do that. They do the
Yeah.
Trump kind of thing. Some
Yeah.
people say, and I say, I think that's wrong. And that is wrong. And I think you're not telling me what you really think. And I just say it to them. And I
Hmm.
think people are so unnerved by that
Hmm.
that they're like, oh, fuck it. I'll just say the truth. I'll just say what I think. Right. And I do think it's a relief for smart people. I do think my interview style is, I'm like, come on, really, really? That's what you're going with. And then I give them an opportunity to do their best work. I think that's one of the things I do.
Yeah. And no one else does it.
No, they don't. I don't know why.
So kudos to you. It's great.
People don't. They do. Oh, they also do suck up. Or they either do gotchas or suck ups. I'm always like someone who's good interviewer. I think John Swan is quite good. Chris Wallace has some really good techniques. Christian Amanpour is quite good. Jake Tapper's really getting there. He might have a career. George Stephanopoulos did a really good interview the
Yeah.
other day. You can be
Yeah.
respectful with that idiot JD Vance, who used to not be like that, FYI, just having spent time with him way back when he was a
Yeah. I
tech
loved his
person.
book.
Yeah, well, he was a tech person. He worked for Steve Case for years. What he did is he was trying to have a respectful discussion, and then when he spewed all kinds of nonsense, he just said, "That's friggin' nonsense. I'm not here to listen to your lies and nonsense." And he just said
Mm.
it. And I thought that was not snarky. He just was like, "This is untrue. Stop
Mm.
it." And I think that was really good. Like I think people are dying for that. And if you do it
Mm.
in a way that is factual and say, Christian's truthful, not neutral, I kind of liked. Not everyone agrees with it, but I do. I'm like, truthful, not you can have a take. And I think reporters for years have pretended they didn't have an opinion or a take based on reported analysis. And I just say, I've talked to 100 people and I'm going with this after I've talked to these people. And I'm putting in some of my biases, etc. And I think audiences appreciate that. I do.
They love it. Well, that's what makes you you. That's your brand. We'll wrap on this, which is
Okay.
back to the podcast, the art of excellence. I always like the guest to define that word, excellence. What do you think of it?
Oh, it's an important word. It really is. I like that. The reason I was attracted to coming on here because I think it's true. I think people doing your very best to get to the heart of something is excellence. Doing your very best to create something fresh and new.
Hmm.
Doing your very best to get it right. And it doesn't mean you always do, by the way. Like people are so easy. People dunk on people so easily now. Gotcha, this and that. And now everyone gets to do it, right? On Twitter or social media. But I think excellence is pursuing high quality, wise, whatever you're making, whether it's a croissant or it's a podcast, with the kind of integrity that I think stands out in today's world of dunking and quick fixes and things like that. And if you
Hmm.
make something excellent, it lasts. It does last and it resonates with people.
I like it.
That's a long-winded saying.
No, it's great. I always read the books of people I interview. I absolutely love this book, and the content's great. But I don't think I appreciate how amazing of a writer you are.
Thank you.
It was funny. It was insightful. I had a blast reading it. Thank you so much for doing this, Kara.
All right. Thank you so much. What a great interview.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, here's my ask of you. First, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Second, tell a friend. Better yet, share it with all your friends and contacts on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Honestly, wherever you hang out online is fine with me. Please leave me a review if you could on iTunes or Spotify or both. The reviews really do help. And finally, try to find one takeaway from this episode that you can apply to your own life. Commit to trying something, anything. As the saying goes, no harm in trying. I leave you with this one question. How do you define the word excellence?